Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. This episode is brought to you by Charles Tyrwhitt, pros in effortless menswear, whether you need a casual weekend look or sharp tailoring. For the month of June, we're offering our listeners 20% off at Charles Tyrwhitt with the code WISDENPOD for use online and, to quote, in store. A busy show lies ahead. At the time of recording, England are 2-0 up in their ODI series against the Netherlands after breaking all sorts of records in the series opener. Katherine Brunt has announced her retirement from Test cricket. The Blast group stage is reaching its climax. We've had another round of the County Championship. Chris Silverwood is enjoying a quietly impressive start to his time with Sri Lanka. And as well as all that and more, we've got some of your questions to answer. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is the Editor-in-Chief of Wisden Cricket Monthly, Phil Walker, and the Managing Editor of Wisden.com, Ben Gardner. But before we go to them, let's hear Mark Butcher's thoughts on the England-Netherlands series, Eoin Morgan's future, and Jamie Overton's England Test call-up. Butch, we're talking the day before the last game of the England-Netherlands series. Have you enjoyed your 2 days off in Amsterdam?
Yeah, it's been all right. Played golf badly for 2 days, and got a couple of early nights in. The weekend was rather lively, has to be said. But yeah, it's been all right, mate.
What are your overall impressions of the series so far? I mean, from the outside, the atmosphere looks amazing. And with the differences between the white and red ball squads these days, it seems like the kind of local tour that England could actually take part in more often than they have previously.
Yeah, I guess it probably could. It's a bit of a trial run for Cricket Netherlands, who I think were a little bit surprised by the volume of people and their enthusiasm for the overstrength beer that they sell here, so things were a little bit chaotic in the first game, and then they got their act together a bit more for the second one. And I suppose it's a great opportunity, I suppose, if you're thinking about it from a fan's point of view. For that, not everybody can afford a month in the West Indies or going down to South Africa or wherever else the travelling fans like to go. And so it's a really good opportunity to see the England team in action away from home. And of course, it's not overly costly to do so.
And then obviously we'll get to England in a second, but Netherlands are missing quite a few of their first choice players. Have there been any Dutch players who've caught your eye so far? Scott Edwards has got runs in both games.
Yeah, I thought quite like the look of Tim Pringle, the left arm spinner, the other day actually. Scott Edwards, the 250s looks a decent enough player, but I mean they're massively outclassed, aren't they? I mean the interesting thing will be on Wednesday if they decide to play on the same pitch again, which will have been 6-7 days old, I suppose. And that might give them a chance. You run the risk of not scoring very many runs yourself and losing the game. But if they play on another fresh one, which has always been the plan, then you just wonder if England might make 500. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, I wouldn't blame them for playing on a used one, and I suppose wouldn't blame them for playing on a brand new one either, because it's a great way of drawing attention to things.
Yeah.
But I don't give them much chance of turning England over unless there is something in the surface.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because they don't get to host international cricket with the eyes of the world on them that often. So on the one hand, they want to show that they're capable of producing international standard tracks. But if you give England the best pitch in the world, they're going to score a lot of runs, and Netherlands are unlikely to be able to overcome that. Whereas if they have a slightly stodgier surface, that's probably their best chance of actually getting a result.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the wickets they took in the run chase, that slowed England down on Sunday were due to the fact that the pitch had dried out quite a bit, and there was a little bit of turn happening. So, it gives you a chance. That is for sure. But no, look, I think it's been terrific. The surface was a belter on day one. It was still pretty good on the second game. The welcome that the fans received and whatever, albeit like I said, they were a little bit sort of undermanned and underpowered on day one, but they rectified that on day two. I think it's been pretty good.
You alluded to the chaos off the pitch in the first game, but on the pitch there was chaos as well. Butler's innings was absurd. He pretty much broke every record there is to break. Tim Wigmore of The Telegraph wrote that since the start of 2015, Buttler only faces on average 23 balls per game. Do you think he bats too low in ODI cricket? I mean, the move up to the order in T20 cricket that was basically based on the logic of let's give your best bat the most balls has worked and then some. Can you see England in their kind of next phase of their white ball regeneration looking to do that in the ODI game as well?
Well, I suppose it's certainly tempting. You know, everyone was dying for Darren Milan to get out on on the Friday, which is no reflection on the way that he played, but simply because you knew there were more brutal hitters to come, i.e. Liam Livingstone, etc. Look, I think England will probably talk about it, but don't forget, if you're playing against South Africa or Australia, you're not, with all due respect, you haven't got Logan van Beek and people like that. You've got Kagiso Rabada running in at you. You might want to hold Joss back a little bit. And 50 overs is a very, very long time. So look, in these circumstances, you can understand why that sounds like a tempting thought, because you're unlikely to kind of be 3 or 4 down due to some wildly good pace bowling in the power plays. But I think under normal circumstances, that you would probably keep it similar. And Joss came in at 4, didn't he, on the Friday? He'd probably be in, I don't know, down to come in at anywhere 4, 5, or 6. And the key to England's success in all white ball formats is the fact that they're flexible enough to change things when the game situation requires it. And so, I'd imagine that's probably what they'll still do.
It's almost as if he comes in after a set number of overs rather than in a set batting position. Obviously, there aren't a huge number of talking points in this series, but the one that is kind of emerging, even if it's confected a little bit, is Eoin Morgan's form. What do you see his ODI future looking like? Because a few weeks ago, he said that he's not committing to the 2023 World Cup just yet. He's not playing back-to-back Blast games because of his body, and he's not in great nick, over quite a few T20 tournaments. And when everyone's back, he's probably keeping Liam Livingstone out of the ODI side. He'll be 37 when the World Cup starts. Do you see his ODI captaincy surviving that long?
No, frankly. I'm a bit surprised. And look, I'm sure Owen being Owen, that he's kind of thought about this and has thought about the succession plan prior to that 2023 World Cup. It would be extraordinary if he hadn't got some sort of idea in place as to how the whole thing is going to work, and that, we're just waiting to hear what that is. But yeah, I can't see it, honestly, because Liam Livingstone needs to be in that side. And the strength of striking power around that squad just means that there just isn't room for somebody just to be captain of the side. It doesn't matter how good that captain is. And I'm guessing that the part of Owen's thoughts on all of this will be that Joss will be ready to take over when we've spoken about this and Joss is ready. We've kind of got it in place. I would be staggered if he tries to make it through to the 2023 World Cup, and that's not because of 2 ducks against the Netherlands. I mean, frankly, who cares? That doesn't matter. But I just think I was surprised that he didn't announce that he was done with it after they won in 2019, and we're now 3 years after that, and he's still going. So, look, he'll probably prove us all wrong, and come back great fitness, have an extraordinary run of form, and lead the side in the next one. But at the moment, that looks like a wild fantasy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then on the bowling front, what do you make of Brydon Cast as an international cricketer? He bowls a good pace. He touches 90 miles per hour every now and again, and with a lot of injuries, a possible Test cricketer as well.
Yeah, he's the timing of his sort of recovery from injury has been good for him, and for England. And yeah, I mean, there's a role there for him, isn't there? There's the obvious Plunkett comparison in terms of England's ability to take wickets in the middle overs, which they've struggled to do a little bit in this series against the Netherlands. So. England will be very keen to sort of bring him along in that role and give him as much time to bed himself in and to get used to the skill set and and work out the plan in his head as to how he's going to do what Liam Plunkett did, which was lots of changes of pace, lots of short balls. and be a real wicket-taking force for England in those middle overs. And there's a spot there for him if he can crack it. So timely for him, and he's got a lot of great attributes. His run up is really smooth. He's a really big, strong guy, and I think he'll get quicker as well. He'll be able to generate more pace than we're seeing in sporadic bursts at the moment. So yeah, I mean the world's his oyster really in terms of that white ball side.
And on the test stuff as well, a bowler not that dissimilar to Cast is Jamie Overton, who's in the England squad, test squad for the first time for the Leeds test. He's an exciting pick who's done brilliantly in the county championship this year.
He has, yeah. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that Jamie Overton was kind of didn't know when to let the ball go. He was bowling multiple sort of over waist high full tosses in Blast games. He wasn't getting much of a run out for Surrey in anything else. And he's worked very closely with Azhar Mahmood. Azhar's the bowling coach down there at the Oval. Azhar's got his action in great shape, and he's sort of delivering on a promise that people were talking about him as a potential England player 5-6 years ago now, because he's got genuine pace. Big strong guy and genuinely can get the ball down there. So wonderful that he's making a resurgence. When did I speak to Azhar about this?
I think about 6 weeks ago, I think. You mentioned
it was probably It was probably April, wasn't it? Something like that. After a pretty eye-catching performance in one of Surrey's wins at the Oval. It might even have been against Somerset or Hampshire. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And he said really happy with his progress, but he's not quite bedded in yet. And perhaps now, 6 weeks later, that is the case. I'm sure that Rob Key knows Azhar Mahmood very well. Obviously, he captained him when he was at Kent in that spell. I'm sure they will have spoken, and if they think it's a good plan, then great to get him back in the fold. Whether he plays or not, I don't know. The word is that Jimmy Anderson might have the game off. Are you hearing that as well?
I haven't known, but
haven't heard that. It's a rumour that's been circulating around the press that he might not play in this one because obviously the India Test match is pretty much back to back after the end of this one. So great. I mean, it's a really good story because too often, I think young bowlers or young fast bowlers, they kind of if the early promises doesn't get fulfilled, then they kind of they end up sort of drifting out of the game altogether. So good story that a man now, how old is he now?
28.
Be what? 28. Yeah, I mean he's coming into the prime of his career. So a young man who's had a bit of a blip, is finding himself back in there again and has that drive and hunger to improve and to try and win a Test match cap. Brilliant.
And finally, at the time of recording, there's news today that Ben Stokes missed training through injury. England don't have a vice captain. Do you see that as an issue at all?
No. Well, the fact that there is no vice captain, I don't see as being an issue. I mean, it'd be an issue if Ben didn't make the Test match for sure. But no, I mean, I don't think that's a big deal. At the moment, the team itself is still a little bit sort of transient or a little bit in flux, and so it might be that if Ben ends up having to miss a game, you look around for the sort of like the most senior guy who happens to be in that playing 11. That might be Stuart Broad. I doubt very much that they'll give it back to Joe Root after 2 Test matches, and I doubt Joe would want it. But there are other options available in that 11 at the moment, albeit not very many.
Well, cheers for your time, Butch, and we'll catch you again next week. Ben, how do you see Eoin Morgan's England career going from here? We're recording this during the final Netherlands ODI, which Morgan is missing through injury. It's not just the form. The odd double failure happens, it's his fitness as well, and with ODI cricket in particular, that World Cup is still quite far away.
Yeah, I suppose there's a few things to say, because as you say, the form in T20 cricket, his form has been just uniformly bad for quite a long time, but the question seems more around the ODI captaincy, and in that he's only played 5 50-over games since the start of last year, and in one of those, match winning 75 not out, so it's harder to say what his form is in that, and the fitness thing again can only be figured out by playing it. My instinct is, and I think it's right if it's happened, is that Morgan will and should give himself July, basically. England played 12 games in July against Africa and India, 6 ODIs and 6 T20s. If he and England struggle and his fitness isn't what it should be, then that could be the time. But if he gets himself back into form, I think that upside is bigger than the downside of not giving Jos Buttler 6 or 12 games as England captain and Liam Livingstone 6 more games middle order. And I think he has earned the right to know for absolute certain that he's got nothing left to give, I think. So I think will be the key time. I think these games really won't have too much sway either way in the decision, and that'll be the crunch moment, I think.
Phil, have you enjoyed the series?
Yeah, I've been gripped. I've been on the edge of my seat. Yes. No, I can't really get particularly engaged in it. I was pleased to see the crowd properly with it and turning up. I have absolutely no issue with these games going ahead at all. I think it's essential that the game is spread far and wide as best as possible. And they've been, relatively competitive games after that first 50 overs where England went berserk. We're midway through one actually, and Netherlands might yet collapse, but they're 130 for 3, going at 5.5, 6 and over. So they're putting up some kind of fight. They're putting up a game, which is enough.
And worth saying that your indifference isn't pointed at the Netherlands; it's more
no.
white ball cricket in general.
Well, no. Don't throw me into that camp. I don't want the grief on a Wednesday morning.
But you know what I mean? You're not.
The way that I tend to judge it is, I've seen a lot of games of cricket these days, and the way that I tend to judge it is when I'm working in the office, as we were last week when England were going ballistic, and the commentators were calling up the next big 6 and the next one here and the next bit. Oh, this one's out of the ground, and the way I judge it is whether I can be bothered to swivel round on my chair and watch the highlights. And I couldn't be asked. Whereas, I know I sound like a relic, and I am, and I respect that. But if there was a test match going on, I'd be watching every ball. I wouldn't be able to not. Even during a kind of flat period, I'd still be watching every ball. Whereas in this, because there is no great jeopardy on it, I don't care if England beat their own world record. It would have been a fleeting moment of bare curiosity at best if they got to 500 as well, on a tiny ground against a team missing some of their best players in the Netherlands, and obviously an extraordinary batting lineup that's been long established with a genius at the heart of it in Jos Buttler. So yeah, personally I can't get too juiced up for it, but that's not to denigrate the fact that the games have gone ahead by any means.
No, I've enjoyed it. I mean, from Netherlands,
but you love your cricket.
Yeah, and you do too. You do as well. Still,
I know.
Yeah, I mean, from the Netherlands' point of view, missing those players is an absolute killer for a series like this, especially when England named such a strong squad as well. I think people assume that England would pick a slightly weaker squad than they did. The big news in the Netherlands camp is that their captain, Peter Seeler, retired mid-game in the second game, having played the first one, missed the second one through injury, and then retired during the second match.
It's felt a bit like an exhibition game, isn't it?
Kind of. I mean, it essentially is a bilateral series without context, because it's in the ODI World Cup Super League, but Netherlands are doing not well enough to be in contention, and England have done too well to be in any sort of strife, really. So
and
it is
also,
a game without
Netherlands
context.
don't have a huge motivation to sort of lift themselves off bottom spot, even because there's not going to be a World Cup Super League next time. I think if there had been, then being 13th or 12th or 11th would have made a difference. Whereas now it's just like, and then they have to kind of pick and choose as well as with the stuff with the county not releasing their players. They have to pick and choose when they have their best squad available anyway, because they'll only get a certain amount of time where they can get these players in, sort of thing.
And we saw when Scotland beat England rather in 2018. This tier of nations can beat teams like England in one-off games, but they just don't have their best team available. So they didn't really have much of a chance. Anyway, moving to the Test match that starts tomorrow at Leeds, which you're both going to. Ben Stokes announced this morning that Jamie Overton will be making his debut at Headingley. It's 9 years after he was first named in an England squad. He's now 28. Phil, we've talked to him about him a couple of times this summer, but what should we expect from Overton in the Test arena?
I think it's good news for England that it's not good news that Anderson is injured, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know the extent of that, by the way. I don't think has that been elaborated on?
Not really, other than that he's out injured.
Okay. So that's a concern, by the way, because it's a pattern that is developing a bit with Jimmy. But anyway, we'll come to that another time. What can you expect from Overton? Pace and aggression, and they haven't fielded a bowler with those traits in the first 2 Test matches. Obviously, in this new gung-ho approach, this is exactly what they're going to need. You can't go into a Test match under these 2 blokes and have a kind of pea shooter attack, albeit a storied one, of course. So that's what you'll get. He's not just going to be the enforcer, although that will be part of his role. Taha wrote a good piece on the website yesterday. He spoke to Gareth Batty about him, obviously his coach at Surrey, and they've been trying to drill home to him that he's more than a explore the middle of the pitch, stick 2 men out on a short leg type bowler. There is more to him than that, and I've watched a lot of him this year, and that's exactly what I've seen as well, that he's bowled telling spells in the midst of a game with a ball that's 40, 50 overs old, and that's what pace can do. And he has bowled full from time to time, and he's got the ball swinging late here and there. The ball of the year so far from a seamer that I've seen was his ball to Matt Renshaw in the Somerset game back in early May, maybe late April, early May. But it was a sunny day, and it was at the Oval, so where it doesn't do that much in the air. It wasn't like it was up at Headingley, and it's just arced massively back into the left-hander from right arm over. It's dream delivery. Renshaw leaves it as you would, and it cleans him up, takes it off stump out the ground. So he has that. He's a transformed quick who was really struggling at Surrey when he made the move up from Somerset. Azam Mahmood got hold of him at the start of the summer. He's the bowling coach at Surrey, and he said, Mahmood said to Batty, "Give me some time with him, and I'll get him right. I'll get him right for you." And that's what's happened. He has a different run up, so he's now accelerating through the crease properly. He's not trying to force it down there, and he's bowling within himself 80%, 85%, and yet still getting it up around that kind of number MPH as well. He can break 90 mile an hour, and that's been confirmed by the ECB's ball tracking technology or whatever, ball speed data that they've been trialling at certain county games. But the naked eye tells you that.
And there's a really good quote from Ben Compton earlier in the season. I think it was to the Times. He said that Jamie Overton was... Ben Compton has faced, by the way, more balls than anyone else has in the country this summer. And he said that Jamie Overton felt 10 miles per hour quicker off the pitch than any other bowler he'd faced all year. And he faced some very good bowlers up to that point. So Jamie Overton is genuinely quick. I don't think he's Archer Stone Wood level quick, but he is right up there, high 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, and it's worth saying as well that it's kind of come from nowhere a bit in that Overton wasn't massively in the conversation at the start of the summer after he struggled last year. But up in that move to Surrey was kind of seen as almost like the last thing he needed to check off, come here and on a flatter pitch, show that he could do it on that as well. Before that, his record, I think because he was rarely playing 14 games a season, so he wasn't putting up loads and loads of wickets, but actually for 4 or 5 years, he was averaging like low to mid 20s in the ball. He came really close to a test call-up. It's basically a toss-up between him and Ollie Stone at the end of the 2018 summer when England wanted an out-and-out quick. These were the 2 guys. Both had extraordinary records that summer, and they just went with Ollie Stone. So although this has come, and obviously it's been talked about a bit, this has come quite quickly from this point, but also it's not that surprising that once it's clicked, England have got him in quite quickly because there's clearly quite a lot to like.
And he can bat as well, by the way.
Yeah.
He's averaging 50 odd, I think.
And that's improved, actually. That's improved in a way almost more than his bowling, I think, even though that's what's one of the
and he gives it a whack. And again, that will appeal to them because, they don't have a number 8 and he could potentially grow into that role. He's got the ball striking ability to be like an 8.5 at the moment, but with a bit of experience at test level, you never know. He could become an 8, which is obviously something that they're crying out for.
And it's not a like for like replacement at all. The closest thing to a like for like replacement would be picking his brother Craig. Yeah. And also it's not a selection without risk. Jamie Overton, as you say, the action and the run-up's only been remodelled this summer. He has always been a bowler who does go at more than 3 and over generally.
Oh yeah.
He
bowls hittable balls.
And you got Matthew Potts who's only going to be playing his 3rd Test match as well. So it's another bold selection from McCullum and Stokes.
It is, but from what you've seen from Potts, even though he had a trickier second Test, he hits his lines and he hits his lengths pretty consistently, Pot. So I think you can go in there with a degree of confidence that he's not going to get kind of hit out the attack. Overton, you're right. I've seen him, as I said earlier, I've seen him bowl a lot. So I have seen him bowl not so well. I've seen him look for swing and over pitch quite a lot. And when you're bowling at real pace, then it flies off the bat, as we know. So, but I don't think they're going to be bothered. I don't think they're going to be bothered about a bowler that's going to go at 4.5 and over. If you end up with 3 for 100 from 20 overs, Stokes and McCullum will say thanks very much.
And especially because even though England have won the last 2 test matches, there have actually been 2 very long spells, one in each of those test matches, where England haven't really looked that penetrative and have looked quite short on ideas. So it's quite proactive that even in victory, England are looking at this early stage in the McCullum era to go on and improve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you can't just look at pure averages and pure economy rates. Like the impact of wickets and when a guy bowling will go a long way to how valuable they've actually been. And Jamie Overton could be that. They say point of difference a lot, don't they? He could be that point of difference bowler.
Phil, David Stump asks, we're currently in a sweet...
Is that his real name?
I don't know.
Right, okay. Stage name. We're a cricket lover.
David Stump asks, we're currently in a sweet spot of a resurgent England, nice weather, and before all the infighting and culture wars kick off with 100. The best few weeks of cricket in a long, long time in this country? ?
Yeah, good point, that.
It has been nice.
It has been lovely. The weather's obviously helping us. I've been impressed with the county stuff that I've seen, and I've really enjoyed it. The clouds are over the horizon for sure, and he's bang on there. And culture wars might be the phrase of the day, but it absolutely applies in cricket, just as it applies in all other walks of life at the moment. Yeah, it's not going to always feel like this, and quite soon it's not going to feel like this. But at the moment, considering what cricket went through towards the back end of last year, with the explosion at Yorkshire, the necessary explosion at Yorkshire, and the necessary, internal assessment of its soul, if you like. It's badly phrased, but you know what I mean. And then obviously a stinker of a winter, and harrowing to watch Joe Root, denuded of his team, and no self-belief left, and just staggering out of that. Considering where you were then, it's been a kind of rousing couple of months for the game, and I totally agree with him there. Totally see where he's coming from. I really, really hope that the 100 goes off well. It doesn't win or negate any arguments, and those arguments will continue to run. And there are glimpses of the impact that the fact that there are minimal games on Sky, for example, of the Blast, which wouldn't have played out in previous years. This is another of these kind of unintended consequences, or maybe some would say intended consequences. I just hope the 100 goes off well. I hope that there's some good games. I hope that the crowds come out as they did last time. From what I've heard, the ticket sales are very good. Obviously, that's another culture war, the cost, as we've discussed before. I really hope that it goes off well. As I say, that doesn't silence or embolden one side or the other, but cricket needs a good summer. It needs a good India test match, for example. I'm quite looking forward to that game, by the way. I think it could end up being a classic one-off game that bizarrely becomes more memorable for the fact that it's a singular thing on its own terms. And
it's only pretty much end of next week as well.
Yeah, I know. It comes thick and fast, all this stuff. But it's a really lovely... Was it a tweet? Or was it an email?
Yeah.
It's a beauty by David, that.
We are about to enter, 14 days of consecutive test cricket, or 13 days, I think, of consecutive test cricket. That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah. And on that, the big news in the women's game this week is that Katherine Brunt has announced her retirement from the test game. In a retirement statement, Brunt said, I feel like as an athlete, there is never an obvious time to step away from doing the thing that you love. But over the past 2 years, thoughts of retirement have surfaced more and more. So I've decided to make a smart decision rather than an emotional one. Test cricket is my absolute passion, and to retire from this format was truly a heartbreaking choice to make. But it allows me to prioritise white ball cricket. Brunt is just one of 2 women who have played test cricket this century to have taken more than 50 test wickets. She averages less than 20 against Australia and less than 16 in Australia. In her last test match, she took 8 wickets in that amazing game at Canberra earlier this year, where England nearly chased down 260 from 48 overs on the final day. Ben, a brilliant Test career, but with Brunt and Shrubsole no longer available in Test cricket, those are two very senior players who will be difficult to replace for the South Africa Test that starts on Monday at Taunton.
Yeah, well, it's a massively new squad, because it's not just in the pace department there's going to be changes. From looking at the squad, it looks like, I mean, they've only really got 5 batters in there who have played Test cricket, so you'd expect Emma Lamb to come in and probably open, so everyone keep the position that they've done, which will be an ask for her, but she's a very exciting player. I'll be interested to see. And then even then, probably it'll be Alice Davison-Richards, I think, at number 7, so you'll have 2 new players in that top 7 even before you get to that pace attack. And then it might just be that it's one of the new quicks that plays and that Kate Cross is sort of the experienced head in the side. But then also they might think that sort of height is the way to go, because they have struggled to take 20 wickets in Test matches, and it might be that they want that height as well as sort of pace and seam up and skill.
So then
and
it's
stuff.
Lauren Bell
and probably Emily Arla as well, who's pretty tall
She's
as well.
in the squad as well. Yeah.
And Freya Davies is the other quick in there. So I'd say that the bowling attack could go one of a few ways, really, because that's if they play both spinners, which they probably will, because Eccleston's the best bowler in the world, and Charlie Dean they see as a wicket-taking threat. But they might also get to the pitch. I mean, it's a Taunton as well, so maybe that'll turn, but they might get to it and actually think, this looks quite green. We only need one spinner, and then all of a sudden all 3 of the new quicks are playing. So that's where the question is, I think.
I think Lauren Bell's maybe half a step ahead of Emily Arlett.
Mm-hmm.
She's been groomed for a while now to take over that new ball slot. She's tall, she's got pace, she's got really good action. So, yeah, look, it's the right time for Katherine to move aside in the 4-day stuff. Sure.
It was quite interesting. Lisa Kitely, the England coach, gave a press conference the other day, and she's basically saying that at Brunt's age and with the lack of cricket under her belt, it was just a risk for her playing the Test match.
Yeah.
And with the busy summer ahead, with the Commonwealth Games, which Brunt is prioritising, it was just what they saw as a risk that was a little bit too
I
much
imagine
to
she'll
take.
be on the commentary team, and she's a scream, so that'd be great fun. She's going to be a great commentator once she knocks it all on the head.
There was no place for Lauren Winfield Hill in that squad, but she was included in an A squad who are currently playing South Africa in a 3-day warm-up game, as well as some of the centrally contracted players who missed out on the Test squad. There are some very young players in there, I think 5 or 6 teenagers. So a very good opportunity to take a look at how they get on in red ball cricket, because obviously there aren't that many opportunities, if any, for young players to play red ball cricket in the women's game at the moment. On the first game of that, Sarah Glenn took Pfeiffer.
Sorry, I thought you'd done. Who's opening with Beaumont?
Emma Lamb.
Is that confirmed?
Not confirmed, but from looking at the squad, it seems like pretty much the option.
Okay, I thought so.
Moving on to the county game, let's start with a bit of transfer news. This morning, Lancashire announced the signing of India all-rounder Washington Sundar. That'll do wonders for the streaming numbers, I'm sure. He'll be available for the whole Royal London One Day Cup campaign, as well as some of the rounds of the county championship, depending on how successful his injury recovery is.
I'll tell you what, it's a really good signing. If they not just for your cheeky sardonic lines, which are fair, obviously. There'll be an element of that, but I mean, he's a quality cricketer, and Old Trafford in mid to late summer. If they can get him in a white shirt for 3 games, that could be critically important for him.
And it's especially, I'm intrigued to see what he actually does in red ball cricket, because he's not played that much first class cricket because he's been injured, and then before that, COVID wiped out the previous Ranji Trophy season, and he's probably batted better than he's bowled in Test cricket, and he has opened the batting, I think, in Indian first class cricket when he was a teenager.
Made a stunning 60 odd, didn't he, against Australia? Maybe on his debut, I think it was.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he opens the batting and is a second spinner alongside Parkinson. So
And also Lancashire have got that history with overseas that once they get them early, they do tend to hang around. Obviously Wasim, but Murali kept coming back as well, and it's a really, really good shout. That they're doing a lot of things right, Lancs.
And after Hassan Ali earlier in the summer as well, that's a seriously good pair of overseas signing. Moving to Yorkshire, David Willey and Tom Kohler-Cadmore have announced that they're leaving Yorkshire at the end of this season. Willey is returning to Northants, while Kohler-Cadmore is heading off to Somerset. Not going to lie, I found the David Willey departure statement slightly jarring. I'll just quote a little bit from it. He said that the cricket and the current players seems to be secondary at the moment to repairing the club's reputation. It certainly felt that way for me over the past 12 months. I'm not quite sure how a player can say that, given all the stuff that's happened in the last 12 months, that should have not been addressed in the way it has done. And I'm also not quite sure on the practical consequences of addressing Yorkshire's recent historical problems with racism, what that practical effect is on the players in the dressing room.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree that it's a jarring statement, and that it's one of those things that even if there is like a motivation, it's understandable, it's kind of best kept behind closed doors. I think part of the reason that he made the statement was that he felt that Yorkshire had misrepresented his reasons for leaving in their release. So his release, when in quotes in the Northants release, said that he had a statement saying that, you know, the right time to return home, that sort of thing. It was very sort of, straightforward thing. Yorkshire's statement from Darren Gough said that Northants had given him a contract offer that they couldn't match. And I think Willie wanted to partly to head off the impression that he was just leaving for more money, basically, that this was a selfish decision rather than something that was right for him for lots of other reasons. I mean, you're right that if, you know, Yorkshire, firstly, it does seem odd that the two would have to come into conflict, you know, the sorting out the off-field stuff and keeping the on-field progress going. That shouldn't have to be the case. And even if it is the case, that wouldn't mean it wasn't the right thing to do. They should take, you know, a few seasons of bad results if it means they can continue to exist as a club, which is what the stakes are, basically. But then from a player's point of view, and as I say, this should stay behind closed doors, it shouldn't be something that should be aired in public. But if you are a player with a short professional career and you feel that the club you're at isn't doing the best to maximise that, then it would make sense to seek opportunities elsewhere, I guess. I think one of the things that I saw reported somewhere was that the Yorkshire basically came to the table late in the contract talks with Willie, that basically slipped down the priority order. And I can see how, as a player, that makes you feel undervalued, even if that's all for completely legitimate reasons. And there is a bigger picture here. I'll see that as a professional sports person, perhaps you have to feel a certain amount of selfishness at certain points to go to clubs. As I say, jarring statement, completely agree. But
very nuanced view. On to the Blast. Surrey is still unbeaten. They beat Somerset in a kind of odd thriller at the Oval last night. They won it off the last ball. Peter Siddle took 2 in 2 in the last over before Conor McCurr hit the last ball for 4. There was an amazing moment when Gus Atkinson got bowled off the penultimate ball of the game. He tried to play off stump York. He tried to guide it down to third man for 4, missed it. Will Jacks was unbeaten at the other end, and he goes crazy, like jumps up and down like an angry toddler. That was quite amusing. And then walked off to a standing ovation when McCurr hit the winning run.
It's a club that's forgotten how to lose.
Yeah, it's great. So they won that game without Pollard, who's out for the rest of the Blast.
Whole tournament, yeah.
Pope, Jamie Overton, Curran, Roy, Topley, and I'm probably forgetting a couple as well. So for them to keep winning with that calibre of players out is seriously impressive. My moment of the week is from the Blast. I was watching the end of the Derbyshire Northants game yesterday, and they chased down 187 with ease. So Derbyshire in the last week have now beaten Yorkshire, Birmingham and Northants back-to-back to go second in the North group.
And Middlesex in the 4-day stuff.
Yeah, you wanted to talk about that last week.
I did, yeah. We did.
This
we
is
ran
your
out of
chance.
time,
This is your chance.
Yeah, I mean, Christ, I can't remember what happened in the game now. It was a 4-wicket win, but again, Middlesex flying high, and to win a tight one, it just shows what Mickey A is doing, and it's rousing stuff. It really is. You know, anybody who looks at the carve up of the county game can't fail to be moved and thrilled when one of the perennial kind of shorthand for failures, isn't it? You know, Derbyshire, Leicestershire, how many players have they produced for England? Blah blah blah, all that stuff. Well, it's amazing what you can do with a couple of good acquisitions and a coach that can just genuinely imbue a little bit of self-belief into some players. And they've got some good ones. You know, I don't know how you pronounce his name. Is it Deploy?
Yeah.
Louis Deploy, yeah, near enough. He's having an absolute stormer. You know, I think he beat Yorkshire basically on his own. I think they needed 19 off the last, and he did it in 5 balls. And he was not out in the Northants game at the death as well, wasn't he? So these kind of players whose names percolate around the game without really having too much of an identity, they are suddenly beginning to perform regularly.
Wade Manson is in the cricketers' who's who when you
Right.
ask who's got the best shot in the game, and half the country comes back with Wade. Not even one Wade Manson shot; it's 5 or 6 different Wade Manson
and he made
shots.
70 odd in 30 balls
Yeah.
last night.
Yeah.
So it's great, and obviously Shan Masood is, we get a nod every week on the show, and he's been the player of the year.
And also pod favourite Mark Watt going at under 8. Again, he's having a very good summer.
And on deploy, he is one of the few players in the world with a proper signature shot in that he plays the scoop shot like no one else. He does it with the back of his bat. He puts his bat backwards and then ramps it over the keeper that way.
But I checked.
Pioneered by Andrew Simons, that, by the way.
Okay. I checked. He does it deliberately, so you can watch it once or twice and think, oh, he's just kind of mistimed it and he's made it up on the spot. But he does actually practice that. And also, to Phil, on your point as well, it's quite heartening looking at that North Group table. I mean, you can come to a conclusion when you see Surrey 9 from 9 essentially in the South Group that the rich clubs are dominating the Blast. But if you look at the North Group table at the moment, you've got Derbyshire in 2nd, Northampton 3rd, Leicestershire in 5th. Yorkshire in 6th, Notts with a star-studded T20 side, struggling in 7th place with just 3 wins from 10. I mean, one of the stories of the Blast, I guess, is 17-year-old leg spinner Rahan Ahmed, who's suddenly become a mainstay in that Leicestershire side after impressing the Under-19 World Cup. He took 4 for 22 the other day, and a couple of massive googlies did serious numbers online. So, it's been a really, really good and exciting Blast campaign. And to be honest, Surrey are through in the South Group. Lancashire are doing well in the North Group. But other than that, it's kind of all to play for, with maybe like Worcestershire, Durham, Sussex and Kent basically out of the running. But the rest of them are in it.
Friday Night Blast. Did you watch any of it? Yes.
I watched some of your show with Dan Norcross.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what it is? So Phil, listeners, is part of this new, I guess it's Soccer Saturday for the Blast, basically Friday Night Blast.
Cricket's Jeff Stelling.
And you're the Chris Kamara to Dan Norcross is Jeff Stelling.
Red Zone, the American football version, is probably a better comparison because you do have the footage and you can go to the commentary from each game. But yeah, we had a little studio at Lord's, an otherwise empty Lord's, but the Wi-Fi is good, and we had 8 screens and a master screen. And a little screen of us two, Herberts, as well. And we did our best over the course of over 4 hours to bring as much of the action as possible to the punters and to move from one game to the other. And, there's been a leg bye at Wantage Road, Dan. And and obviously you can't cover every single wicket, especially down the pipe when things are going berserk in each game. But for a trial run, in effect, it was soft launched a couple of weeks before that, and Mark Church and Matt Floyd did it, formerly of Sky, and then it was launched a bit more on Friday night. And while there will be some teething problems with it, I suppose, and a couple of the feeds weren't quite as strong as others, which we've seen as well, but this is an emerging new media for cricket. We haven't fully nailed it yet, but the fact is that this wouldn't have been possible a couple of years ago or even last year, but the counties are moving along the line, and while me and Norcross staggered out, not for the first time on a Friday night in fairness, but we staggered out knackered at the end of it. It was a good thing to be a part of, and hopefully it can grow from here and become a relatively regular staple of people's cricket, because the Blast needs it, right? It needs that kind of context, I think.
And our long-standing criticism of the Blast is that it's impossible to follow, and this does make it, when you've got, 7 or 8 games happening on a Friday night, it does make it
Did you think it worked, be honest?
Yeah, no, genuinely, it does. It does. I think...
How did I look?
Fine. One thing that I think will just get better over time is like the snappiness between games and stuff like that. That will surely just get better over time.
Yeah. So there were technicians running in and out constantly and fiddling with wires while me and Norcross just spouted.
And Norcross fiddling with your mic as you spoke.
Yes. Oh, you watched it right at the end. Blimey, so some people were still watching after 10 o'clock. Wow. Okay.
Chris asks, should there be a squad limit? Should there be squad limits on county squads, the size of Surrey's, Lancashire, Warwickshire's, etc., is huge compared to the smaller counties? I basically think no, because the bigger teams with more international players lose those international players. And you look at Surrey at the moment, they've got so many players missing. They had to give a debut yesterday to young Nico Rifa. That was his first T20 game. So they do need squad sizes that big, I guess.
Yeah, and there is a salary cap, even though some of the small counties don't really get near it. But that there is that in place, well, to sort of check the rampant ambition of your Surreys and your Lancashires and whoever.
And if you're seeing Derbyshire, etc., 5 places ahead of Northampton in the table, I guess that's not something to be overly worried about at the moment. We've got a question in from, and his username is important here, by the way, at Cornwall Morris asks, there's constant chat about possibly losing a few counties from the professional game. But if you had to add one to the current group of 18, which county would you pick? Any reason is valid. Phil, you had an answer straight away when we talked about this before the show.
Well, I don't know if it stands up, but Berkshire are the dominant team. And
They've won 3 out the last 4. No, I checked it. They've won 3 out the last 4.
Right, okay. And I met a bloke actually at Lord's who's closely involved in the Berkshire sort of cricket association, if you like, and he was saying that there's immense kind of natural resources, if you like. You know, there's a lot of real interest in the game throughout the county, and obviously there's kind of built up areas as well, sort of around Reading and so on, that would benefit from the club, from the county becoming first class. And that's what happened with Durham. They just became so good and so dominant that it became this sort of unstoppable train, if you like. I don't know enough about Berkshire to be sure on that. Geographically, Cornwall Morris, he's bang on, because, you know, we could certainly do with another focal point down there, right in the deep west.
I mean, Devon, Cornwall obviously, but Devon are producing a lot of good players at the moment. The Overton twins, Don Bess, etc.
Yeah, well, that's the other.
And it's a hotbed for cricket down there.
That's the other argument, I suppose, that Berkshire might have the best record, but if all the players who were born in Devon played for Devon, they would be, I think, a very, very a pretty strong team. And there is a Devon and Cornwall to Somerset pipeline a bit, and you wonder if there could be a Devon and Cornwall 19th. I originally misread this and thought it was if you had to lose one for any sort of spurious reason, who would you lose? And I had to go for Leicestershire, not for the normal reasons, but because if you want Americans to get into cricket, you can't have a team they're going to pronounce Leicestershire. So
edit that out.
Beautiful,
Ben. Beautiful.
Elsewhere, in the international game, Chris Silverwood's Sri Lanka have beaten Australia in an ODI series. Ben, he's had a really good start to his time in charge. Sri Lanka beat Bangladesh in a test series in Bangladesh, which not many teams do. And this is a strong Australia side, and Sri Lanka, as we've been talking about before on the show, have a pretty poor recent record in ODI cricket.
Yeah, and that Bangladesh series was kind of the Silverwood template of, you know, batting big, and he's talked about the first 12 balls being key for a bowler, all very sort of obvious things, but also the right things to focus on, I guess, especially if you're a side who are looking to improve quickly from quite a low bar. And yeah, that this Australia series has been great after seeming like it could be a massive blowout. I mean, the first game Australia won it by 10 wickets in the T20s, and then since then it's been close all the way through. I mean, they've kind of traded blows, but Sri Lanka have been the better side by a margin since then. The game that's almost most worth mentioning is the third T20I, which was just ridiculous. So
that's the mad finish.
Yeah, so Dasan Shanaka, as the captain, was 6 off 12 balls at the time. Sri Lanka needed 59 off the last 3, and then Australia brought on Josh Hazelwood to bowl. He's basically unhittable at the moment. And then he just took off, and they won it with a ball to spare. He ended up 54 of 25, I think. So that would be 49 off his last 13 balls. Apparently the most runs ever hit off the last 3 overs of a T20 to win it. So that was ridiculous. But then it's kind of been, that was freakish, I suppose. What's been encouraging is that since then it's been
sustainable.
Exactly, yeah. And contributions from lots of different players. And as you say, young players like, Asalanka, Pathan Nasanka's made 100. Wanindu Hasaranga's still young and one of the best white ball rounds in the world at the moment, really, considering that you don't get many people who can bowl leg spin and hit sixes in the way that he can. Kulsa Mendes isn't quite so young, but you'd really fancy him to have like sort of 3 golden years, I reckon.
I was going to mention him because he got a run of all 80 odd in one of the games, I noticed. And with him, you never know if he's going to be in the side or not, but he's got, you know, a lot of natural ability, and he was really highly thought of a few years back and had a kind of stinker of a run, had a couple of injuries as well. So to have him back, I think he was batting 3 there as well in that game. And yeah, I'm really pleased for Silverwood. Good man, brute of a job with England. Atherton wrote he was out of his depth. I think there was a sort of, unavoidable element of truth to that statement. That said, his, as you say, Ben, his philosophy, if you like, if you can combine those components, that idea, with a lot of natural ability that's maybe not been focused too much in recent years, then that becomes quite a useful combination. And we've said about Sri Lanka before, predating Silverwood, we've said there's a lot of good young players coming through, and they've got pace in their attack. They're always going to produce watchable batters. So yeah, it would be really, really good if they can come again, and they will, because they love cricket out there.
And I guess with Silverwood as well, there's so much more than just being a cricket coach to being the England head coach, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Especially for him. I mean, well, firstly, he was selector. And then also, by the end, he was, booking net times and doing all that kind of stuff. Like it was a shambles by the end. And I think he was basically doing 7 jobs and wasn't very well suited to a lot of them. But the thing that I think he might just be quite a good coach in and of itself, as in he can take players and make them better players. I mean, and it's kind of has been almost written from history now, but England were an improving side, and actually quite a good side, for the first 18 months he was in charge. They won 4 series in a row. 2 of them were away from home.
One up in India.
Yeah, and with a young team that looked like had the core or something, and then obviously everything fell apart. But that, like, if he can just focus on just having a group of players that he knows and can get to know him and the other stuff, then there's no reason why it can't be a good,
and it's not that similar a job, because as we say, it's a very young squad. I mean, one player we've not mentioned in the podcast before, Dunith Willalago, was one of the players of the Under-19 World Cup. He's been batting 7 and bowling left arm spin, and then between him, Hasaranga and Mahesh Tikshana, you've got 3 very different young, very good white ball spinners. So they've got the core of something that they can really take forward. Unfortunately for Sri Lanka, that series is not part of the ODI World Cup Super League, so they're still in quite a lot of trouble in that. In India, South Africa drew 2-2 in a T20I series against India. The decider was rained off. And in the Caribbean, West Indies are 1-0 up against Bangladesh. Kemar Roach taking a hatful of wickets there.
And Kyle Mayers as well.
Kyle Mayers took a couple.
Nipping in. Amazing.
Can we just say something about Kemar Roach? Just that,
yeah.
that 5 in the third innings came when it just looked like Bangladesh might put up a bit of a fight, set West Indies 150 or something, and there could have been a bit of a dogfight at the end. So it was a really important spell, and he's quietly just put up a record that kind of ranks among kind of a lot of West Indies great bowlers. He's now
he went past Marshall or Holding?
No, he's joint with Holding.
Right.
He's 10 wickets or so behind Joel Garner, so he'll probably end up 4th among West Indies quicks, behind Marshall, Walsh, and Ambrose, which is massive. I mean, and
with an average, it's almost identical to Anderson as well.
Yeah, and
Really?
The Anderson comparison is quite an interesting one, because he and quite a relevant one, because he started as a proper tearaway. I think if you remember in one of his first few series, he basically heralded the start of the end of Ponting's career when he troubled him with a short ball, broke his hand, I think, and that was something that people then targeted Ponting with from then on. He is no longer a tearaway. He kind of had a bit of time in the wilderness, sort of rediscovered himself and reinvented himself as almost like an Anderson-like low 80s bowler, very consistent, lots of skills. And he has been the linchpin of that attack for a time when West Indies have really, really needed a linchpin. You wonder, as much as they're at a low ebb at the moment, like where would they be without Kemar Roach? It kind of doesn't really bear thinking about.
And it's a really exciting attack as well with Roach, and you got Seals and Joseph, who's been playing Test cricket for a while, but haven't really seen him bowl with the kind of the accuracy that he had in that first Bangladesh Test match as well. So yeah, maybe England's defeat in the West Indies wasn't so bad after all. Here's a question from a listener, Sid. Long-time fan of the magazine, have loved it since his all-out cricket days, a precursor to Wisden Cricket Monthly. I started reading it when I was 8 or 9 years old. I'm now 27.
That makes me feel old.
And I started listening to the podcast about 2 years ago. I have a question for the pod. If you have time, please could you discuss some interesting cricket books you've read this month? I know we have a section on books in the magazine, but some coverage on the podcast would be nice as well. There is
But
an
first up,
assumption in that question.
I love you, Sid. Thanks for continuing to read, my man.
There's quite a sweet assumption in that question that we read multiple cricket books a month. I personally don't. The most recent cricket book that I read was Crickonomics, that we talked about when Tim Wigmore came on the podcast a few weeks ago, which is, as I've said it then and I'll say it again now, is a brilliant and fascinating and almost essential read, I guess, if you want to understand the economics of the game at the moment. But Phil, you wanted to talk about another book that is not yet out.
Yeah, I did. It's good timing by Sid, because I wanted to talk about this anyway at some point this month. This is a book which I think is going to win lots of awards, and I think it should win lots of awards. It's an extraordinary thing, and it's called Being Geoffrey Boycott, right? Now, if anyone's have you read The Damned United by David Peace? Do you know of it?
I've watched the film.
Okay, well,
yeah.
The book is a great bit of work, and The Damned United tells the story of Clough's 60-odd days at Leeds United in the early 70s, and it's done as a kind of imagined historical fiction, getting inside Clough's mind, and based obviously on a lot of texts from the time. Anyway, this book has a similar kind of feel. However, it's a joint effort between John Houghton, one of the best cricket writers around, and Boycott himself. And it stemmed from the first lockdown, well, the first stage of the pandemic. Boycott decided on a whim to sit down and try and remember, and he does have an extraordinary memory, Boycott, try and remember every one of the 108 test matches that he played, right? And remember the conversations that he had, and the hotels that they stayed in, and the team talks, and the sort of mini machinations around a test match week, and sitting by the radio waiting to hear if you're in the squad, and all of these details, the big and the small, he tried to put it down on page. Now, because this is Boycott, and because he has this extraordinary memory, and because he has this amazing dedication to what Houghton describes as the one love of his life, the true love of his life, which was playing cricket, he wrote and sent a Word document that landed at my colleague's desk, Matt Thacker, who is the chief publisher of Fairfield Books. The document came out at 111,877 words. 111,000. And Matt read it and thought it was amazing, and then showed it to John Houghton, who's always had an obsession with Boycott and has written very beautifully on Boycott for a WCM and various other publications. Houghton then got to know Boycott, and they've developed some kind of friendship and have now collaborated on this book. And it is a first-hand account from Boycott of these 108 games, and a second-hand account with Houghton's incisions, if you like. And it comes out as this extraordinary combination of writerly brilliance in Houghton's hands, and the license that you have, although of course he's done his research and he's spoken to Boycott, and he's based a lot of Houghton's bits on what Boycott's written in the first place in that 111,000 words, and it transposes Houghton's bits with Boycott's first person account. So it's a really brilliant combination. I don't think I've ever seen, certainly never in a cricket book have I seen this before. I just want to kind of just read a little bit. This is Houghton doing Boycott, if you like, Houghton talking to Boycott. This is from an early chapter. From 1962, okay? And Boycott's averaging 20-something for Yorkshire, and he's struggling, and he's a 22-year-old bloke in spectacles, and he's
not Test cricketer yet.
Not a Test cricketer, slightly socially awkward, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. He's a man slightly out of place in that Yorkshire dressing room. This is Houghton. You have just finished breakfast at the Salisbury Hotel in Scarborough before the match against Warwickshire at North Marine Road, when Brian Close, back from England duty, finds you and says he wants you to open the batting. No, thank you, Captain, you tell Brian Close. Well, you have a choice, Close says. You can either open the batting or not play. I've taken the decision to make you into an opening batsman because your technique, temperament and approach to batting fits it. Now go and do your best. You do. You always do. You finished the 1963 season third in the national batting averages. You've opened the batting for many teams, but you've never liked opening the batting. You do now. Close is right. It suits your game, that immaculate technique, and it suits your temperament. You like the certainty of knowing when you will bat and who you will face. You can prepare for certainties. You can structure a life around 11:30 a.m. on the first morning of a game. And that's just a bit of Hotton for you. And then it goes into Boycott's own first-person account. So you're constantly jumping back and forth. I know I've gone on about this.
This is really interesting.
But it's a truly brilliant bit of work. It comes out in a few weeks' time. In fact, I think it comes out with the 26th. Yeah, it comes out next week on June the 30th. It comes out, and Boycott will be up at Leeds signing copies, and he'll be here and there around the course of the summer. He's put his heart and soul into it, and I think it humanises the bloke in a way that will take many by surprise, I suppose. And for those who are sympathetic to the epicness of the Boycott story, it will be an absolutely essential read. It's a brilliant piece of work.
Let's try and get him on the show to talk about it.
Oh, I've had words.
Okay, excellent.
Watch this space.
Listeners, Ben's moment of the week is related to this quite long question, so bear that in mind as I read it out. This is from Shervo, who, if you don't remember, is our listener who's emailed in a few times in the past. He only discovered his love of cricket during Alistair Cook's farewell 100 at the Oval in 2018, and he's recently started playing the game. Shervo says, firstly, thought I'd follow up on my nascent cricket badgerdom after you helpfully sent me all those YouTube ideas last autumn. I've been playing a bit for the last few weeks, my score growing exponentially with each match, 0, then 1, and then last week 2 not out over several overs in what turned out to be the longest partnership of a lacklustre innings. It sounds like a small thing, but I was a nerdy kid growing up, so playing any kind of sport is something I've never really done before, and certainly not something I expected to start in my mid-30s. It's brought me a heck of a lot of joy so far this summer, got me out of the house, not to mention the great feeling of contributing to a team. I'm grateful to my long-suffering but patient teammates who endure my lacklustre batting and terrible fielding. Anyway, all of this has led me to realise it is a very difficult game to pick up as an adult if you've never played cricket before. So I wonder, what do the teams think can be done to get more adults into playing cricket recreationally, especially those who, like me, who didn't as youngsters? So much of the focus is on involving kids, which is great, but given the obvious mental and physical benefits of playing the game, could more attention be paid to helping older people take it up for the first time? Interested to hear your thoughts. Ben, you didn't play cricket as a kid, and you played cricket this Saturday. So first of all, what was your experience of doing that?
This was my first cricket match for 6 years or so since we had a sort of a silly game out on the Oval. And this was also quite a silly game for Jim Wallace's stag do. But it was fun. I suppose if I had to pick a moment of the week from it, it would be Taha Hashim's whip through mid-wicket, sort of back leg in the air. He looks very good in a cricket jumper and with the collar pops. He had a furrowed brow, no helmet on, not a hair out of place.
And crucially, it was photographed as well.
Yes, he looked extraordinary. But it was, I mean, as I said, I've got no talent for cricket really, no training, but I had fun. I think one of the keys was that it was pairs cricket, and I wonder if this could be something that is actually in a way rolled out a bit more widely for people who are trying to get into it, because if you want to go and play cricket, no matter what level you are, you can kind of find a game to play. You'll be able to go and play a Sunday game for a village team who are desperate for an 11th player. The thing is that you might get to play but not be involved too much. Like if you might get a bat, but you'll get out within the first few balls, and then you might not get a bowl. If you do, you get an over, and then they'll realise, that you actually don't really know how, and it's kind of hard to learn mid-game. And I don't know what training facilities there would even be for people to go and get training as an adult, as a beginner. But with the good thing with pairs cricket is you can have the rule set up so that if you get out, you lose runs, but you don't actually get out. So you can actually have fun doing something that is competitive, but without that thing that is what makes cricket great, which is, the fact that one mistake can lead to, your day being over and sort of thing, but also that does make it quite impenetrable for someone who is not as good as everyone else they're playing with. So I don't really have a solution, and I don't think, cricket is going to change its formats overnight, but that,
I think it's a really good
that's the
answer.
barrier, I think. Basically.
I think it's a really good answer. I mean, there's a reason why kids play pairs cricket at the start, right? And also, I think you're also right that so often when you're getting into the game, you're brought in as a ringer for a team that's playing 40 overs on a Sunday. And that isn't exactly the most welcoming format for someone who never played before. I would actually recommend, if possible, if you're getting into the game, playing last man stands cricket. If you're in an area that has a last man stands league. I've got a friend who, very similar to Shervo, only got into the game slightly later, basically 2019 World Cup, in his early to mid 20s, and he really wanted to start playing. Played a little bit during lockdown, and he now plays last man stands cricket, which is 7 or 8 aside.
It's 8 aside.
8 aside. You play it on an Astro in a park, and you're still out when you're out, but the standard is lower. It's not taken as seriously as club cricket is. I think that's better and easier to get into. The games don't take too long, so if you do get out quickly, you're not sitting there all day watching people. Is done and dusted within 2 hours. I think that's worth doing, and I think. Also, I guess maybe taking the focus away from playing matches initially. I've got a friend who, again, is a guy who plays for our third 11 who only started playing during lockdown. He goes to the nets loads, and he's actually pretty good for someone who only started playing in 2020. So I think
it takes a bit of guts, I think, to walk into a net, especially if you are starting from scratch, or if you're looking to go again, if you like, having played a little bit when you were younger. But you will always find a welcome there. And if there's a few people playing in a net, they will, trust me, they will be happy to bring another person in, share the load. And if you bowl for half hour, you'll get a bat for 5 or 10 minutes. That's the etiquette of it all. So yeah, it can be a bit daunting for sure. But yeah, get in there, and you will inevitably meet people. You'll talk to people. They will have Sunday games if you want to get involved from there on in. And look, I'm on various WhatsApp groups with sort of friendly cricket clubs. You can have 55 names on that thing, but they're still struggling to get more than 8 players on a Sunday. So there are games out there, but you have to take that jump a little bit.
If anyone's listening to this, our third 11 is still short for Saturday if you fancy a game in Thamesden. Phil, let's hear about your game on Saturday, because that sounded quite fun.
Yeah, well, I'll keep it as brief as I can. I played in the first team at my club in the Essex League. And we got 233 in our 50 overs. It's a time game, but we batted our full 50 overs. And at lunch or at tea, had my tea, went downstairs with a cup of tea, and walked along the corridor. And there was a bloke already in his pads, and I hadn't seen him when we were batting. Really, I hadn't really paid much attention to their fielders. I saw him, and he just looked like looked like a cricketer, okay? And I thought, oh, you're going to get runs. I didn't say a word to him, just walked past him with my cup of tea, and I thought, oh, you're going to get runs. Everything about it worked, right? All the muscles were in the right place. The pads were perfect. The thigh pad didn't bulge out too much on one side. The helmet fitted immaculately. And also, crucially, tellingly, gun and more bat, gun and more gloves, gun and more pads. We go out to defend 230 odd. And this chap got 135 in about 25 overs and was out comfortably before the end. So he got 135 in about 170, 180. No one knew who he was from our team. We're not the most diligent of blokes, I suppose. Turns out he's a chap called Grant Rollifson, 25-year-old, South African, 47 first-class games at an average of 41. Highest score, 224 not out, 800s. 38 List A games, average of 43. Highest score, 147 not out. And he is last year's South African one-day player of the year, on the cusp of making his international debut. Now, look, this is all part of the fun, sure. And this in first-team cricket, you get these lads, you know.
I mean, it is worth saying.
But my God, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, but your first team player actually a very high standard of club cricket.
Yeah, so it's not kind of freakish, sure, to have a really good overseas cricketer, you know, and he'll be on the payroll at the club, and fair play to him. And this is at Billericay CC in Essex. You know, they're a really brilliant club. Essex 2s play there, so sure, it's not freakish by any means. But it was funny that we kind of came off, sat in the dressing room. Yeah, that was a good knock. Anyone know who he was? No one knew. So I sort of Googled and had a look. Turns out he's this lad. But I couldn't help but enjoy it. We've got a really good bowling attack and a couple of quicks. One in particular, bowled a sharp spell. And as I say, Essex 2's play there, so it's a good pitch. And he was just pulling you right in front of mid-wicket. Just sees it so early, right in front of mid-wicket. Just a stunning knock. We lost at least half a dozen cricket balls during it as well.
My question was, if you're playing at that standard, do you have to look really, really good to stand out in terms of just how you're carrying yourself?
Yes and no. There's still, for all that there's loads of talent there, and another lad got 90 batting with him, but there was no it was clear who the pro was. And the lad who got 90 batted beautifully, right? But his trouser leg was halfway up his arse, and the jumper didn't quite fit, and all of that, and his bat was a bit knackered and taped up, and all of that. And so it's still club cricket, but then you just have this sort of shimmering beast who emerges out the dressing room, and he's already 70 not out before he's faced a ball. Anyway, it was all good fun. We got smashed as clearly. But yeah, it's good fun to dip my toe into first team cricket. I don't play much of it, mainly because I'm probably not good enough for it. But it was fun anyway.
Made a runnable 20, Phil.
22 from 23.
Yeah.
I also made a runnable 20 this weekend. So good week for that. Anyway, that is all we have time for on today's show. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Ben. We'll be back straight after the Headingley Test match. Cheers.